CIO and head of research and a CNBC contributor. He's very calm, even in the face of adversity. But this time the markets have come back to you in a big way. Because at this point, I think they've exceeded your targets they were a couple of months away from where we are right now, and we're already there. So you're raising your targets overall?
Yes, I think, when at the April lows, we thought we could make a move back to 5,500.
Right, we're at 5,900 on the S&P.
That's right. But our full year target was 6,600, so I think that's still a reasonable expectation.
You never changed that?
We haven't changed it.
Never did. Even on April, week of April 2nd or 7th or 2nd, you didn't change it.
No, it felt very shaky because that would have been, a couple 1,000-point move needed. But now that I look at 2026, I think businesses are in better shape now than they were in February. So I think making 6,600 actually seems more achievable today than it did in February.
And you think a bull market started April 7th, or a new bull market started April 7th? In everything, because the NASDAQ already, if you just use 20% to measure what is an actual bull market, people think we need a broader indicator, a broader reason to call something a bull. But at this point, I think the S&P is also in a bull market.
Yeah, I think that the waterfall decline into the April lows was such a reset of sentiment. People talked about Armageddon, and we saw some of the most rapid deleveraging of hedge funds ever, and a collapse in investor sentiment, and a huge change in positioning. So those are, I think, things that look like what happens in a bear market. And the ISM has never broken above 50 in a sustained way. Market tops usually need an ISM to stay above 50 for a period of time. So I think we're at the start of a bull market. And as I look at 2026, I think housing could actually be a big lever to pull next year.
What do you think of the recent inflation data? And is it real? Is it lasting? Is it going to turn around and head back up because of tariffs? Were you surprised at those numbers on the last couple of Friday and then a couple weeks before then?
Well, as you know, the inflation for the last month actually has defied expectations because a lot of people said these shortages would cause a spike, and instead core inflation actually has been trending lower. But to me, inflation was really a story about housing and auto insurance. Those were powering inflation for the last 2 years. I mean, combined, that's 75% of the rise in inflation. Housing is actually now subtracting from inflation month over month. And I think in some ways, on a real-time basis, that tells me I don't think core inflation is actually going to be turning up, even if goods prices go up.
You don't?
No, I kind of agree with Waller's comments.
You do agree with Waller's comments?
Yeah.
So you're anticipating cuts, several cuts this year?
Well, I think that if core inflation behaves, then we are in a really tight real rate environment, right? 4.5% monetary policy and 2.5% or 2% core inflation. I mean, there's a need to actually reduce interest rates.
Do you, Tom, at this point think that interest rates, because it doesn't matter whether we reduce or not, would the long end go up if they reduce the short end because of $37 trillion or this bill that's the big, beautiful bill? Are there worrisome things on the horizon other than inflation, current inflation?
Well, yeah, the U.S. is on an unsustainable sort of path for deficits, but Japan's actually had higher rates, and their interest rates have been behaving for a long time. I mean, not recently. So I think the long end is essentially unpredictable. When investors worry about it rising too dramatically, then I think that's when the bond market can have some influence on both the Fed and the Treasury. But I think at these levels, it's not that alarming.
So what's Bitcoin? What is it moving with? Just risk assets at this point? It got back to an all-time high, which you were forecasting as well. But now I think, what are we, 104 this morning? So it's pulled back.
Yeah, I think it's consolidating. It makes sense. Bitcoin is responding to global liquidity, which is moving up, and I think anticipating a dovish Fed next year. So that's a tailwind for Bitcoin. But, Bitwise has a great stat. 95% of all Bitcoin's been mined, but 95% of the world doesn't own Bitcoin. So I just think that there's still a huge demand versus supply imbalance, meaning there's a lot more potential buyers of Bitcoin over the next 10 years. And so I think there's a lot of upside into year end.
Into your 150 target.
Yeah, 150, maybe 200, even 250 this year.
What? 150 to 200 to even 250. And what's you don't have a terminal price on that, do you?
Well, it's, I think at a minimum it should have the same network value as gold. Mm-hmm. And if you look at above ground gold, it's probably 23 trillion. So that would be, 1.2 million for Bitcoin. But I think Bitcoin is more valuable than gold. So, gold, Bitcoin could be 2 million, 3 million long term. Even higher.
Okay. Thank you. And we're talking years, obviously, but 95% mined. I don't think the last one is mined till, 2150 or something.
Yeah.
It's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, depending on what decimal you want to use, it's probably like, 2040 or something. But yeah, but it's, if you're having something forever, it'll always.
So what's your terminal value?
That's what we just said.
Yeah,
the final.
He said 2.5 million.
2.5 million at the end.
Yeah.
Or maybe, maybe higher.
Or maybe even higher.
I didn't appreciate that point.
Yeah, it could,
But I guess maybe the way I meant that is, does that happen at the end after it's all?
When it's all mined.
When it's all mined?
But yeah, and there'll be network fees generated.
Or does that happen before it's mined?
It's like as if Berkshire did a buyback and there was only one share left. What would Berkshire's share price be? It'd probably be the market value of Berkshire.
And as you said, if I go halfway to the wall, and then halfway to the wall, and then halfway to the wall, I'll never get to the wall.
Yeah, that's right. You can cut something in half forever.
We begin today with Treasury Secretary. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Morning, Margaret.
There's so much to get to. I want to start with China, because the defense secretary just said there's an imminent military threat from China to Taiwan. Days earlier, Secretary Rubio said he'd aggressively revoked Chinese student visas. On top of that, you have curbing exports to China. Trade talks, you said, with Beijing are stalled, and President Trump just accused China of violating an agreement and now says no more Mr. Nice Guy. Are you intentionally escalating this standoff with Beijing?
Well, I don't think it's intentional. I think that what Secretary Hegseth did was remind everyone that during COVID, China was an unreliable partner. And what we are trying to do is to de-risk. We do not want to decouple, Margaret, but we do need to de-risk, as we saw during COVID, whether it was with semiconductors, medicines, the other products. We are in the process of de-risking.
Making the United States less reliant on China, but at the same time.
And the whole world. The whole world, because what China is doing is they are holding back products that are essential for the industrial supply chains of India, of Europe, and that is not what a reliable partner does.
So is that, what specifically is President Trump saying when he says they're violating an agreement? Because it was the one you negotiated in Geneva earlier this month. And what's the consequence for that?
Well, we will see what the consequences are. I am confident that when President Trump and Party Chairman Xi have a call, that this will be ironed out. But the fact that they are withholding some of the products that they agreed to release during our agreement, maybe it's a glitch in the Chinese system. Maybe it's intentional. We'll see after the president speaks with the party chairman. That's
critical minerals, rare earths. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
So the president has said a few times that he was going to speak to President Xi, but he hasn't since before the inauguration. Beijing keeps denying that there was any contact. Do you have anything scheduled?
I believe we'll see something very soon, Margaret.
Do you have a conversation with your counterpart, or Lutnick with his counterpart at the commerce level?
Well, I think we're going to let the two principals have a conversation, and then everything will stem from that.
JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon spoke this week at an economic forum, and he gave this read on Beijing.
I just got back from China last week. They're not scared, folks. This notion they're going to come bow to America, I wouldn't count on that. And when they have a problem, they put 100,000 engineers on it, and they've been preparing for this for years.
Have you underestimated the Chinese state's backbone here?
Again, Margaret, I hope it doesn't come to that. And Jamie's a great banker. I know him well, but I would vociferously disagree with that assessment that the laws of economics and gravity apply to the Chinese economy and the Chinese system just like everyone else.
But when you were last here in March, we were trying to gauge what the impact of the standoff with China and with the tariffs on the rest of the world would do for American consumers here at home. At that time, you told us you were going to appoint an affordability czar and council to figure out 5, you said, or 8 areas where there will be some, pain for working class Americans. Where are you anticipating price increases?
Well, thus far, we wanted to make sure that there aren't price increases, Margaret, and thus far there have been no price increases. Everything has been alarmist. That the inflation numbers are actually dropping. We saw the first drop of inflation in 4 years. The inflation numbers last week, they were very pro-consumer.
Right. But you listen to earnings calls just like we do. You know what Walmart's saying, what Best Buy's saying, and what Target are saying.
But Margaret, I also know what Home Depot and Amazon are saying. I know what the South China Morning Post wrote within the past 24 hours, that 65% of the tariffs will likely be eaten by the Chinese producers.
So are there 5 or 8 areas that you have identified, as you said back in March, where American consumers will be able to have lower prices or should be warned of higher prices?
Well, a lot of it's already working its way through the system. So we've seen a substantial decrease in gasoline and energy prices. So that's down 20% year over year. We've seen the food prices go down, these notorious egg prices. Through the good work of President Trump and Secretary Rollins, egg prices have collapsed. So we're seeing more and more. And what we want to do is even that out across all sections of the economy. So inflation has been very tame. Consumer earnings were up 0.8% last month, which is a gigantic increase for 1 month. So real earnings minus low inflation is great for the American people, and that's what we're seeing.
But because when you met with the Chinese earlier this month, and you went down from the 145% tariff down to about, it's like 30%. 30% is not nothing, that tax on goods coming in here. Retailers are warning of price hikes. Well, when you go back to school shopping, things are going to cost more.
But Margaret, some are and some aren't. Home Depot and Amazon said they're not. And
Home Depot and Amazon aren't where you go for your back to school shopping. When you buy your jeans, when you buy your crayons, when you buy all those things that parents are going to be
I don't know about you, but I do it online at Amazon. This isn't an advertisement for Amazon. And guess where most of the Halloween costumes in America get bought? At Home Depot. So that's just not right. There's a wide aperture here. Different companies are doing different things. They are making decisions based on their customers, what they think they're able to pass along to their customers, what they want to do to keep their customers. And I was in the investment business for 35 years, Margaret, and I will tell you, earnings calls, they have to give the worst case scenario, because if they haven't and something bad happens, then they'll be sued.
It's not always the worst case. It's the most probable case.
No. They have to give the worst case.
So Walmart, there was just a piece published with the conservative strategist Karl Rove. I'm not asking about politics because he is a political strategist, but he went in on the math here. And he points out that Walmart has a profit margin of less than 3%. He says, if it does what Mr. Trump says, eat the tariffs, it can't break even. It can't absorb the cost of imported pair of kids' jeans with a 46% tariff on Vietnam, a 37% tariff for Bangladesh, or 32% tariff on sneakers from Indonesia. Other companies are in the same pickle. So should companies cut back on the amount of goods they have on their shelves or just on their profitability?
That's a decision company by company, Margaret. And I had a long discussion with Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart, and they're going to do what's right for them.
Before consumers, the reality is there will either be less inventory or things at higher prices or both.
Margaret, when we were here in March, you said there was going to be big inflation. There hasn't been any inflation. Actually, the inflation numbers are the best in 4 years. So why don't we stop trying to say this could happen and wait and see what does happen?
Just trying to gauge for people planning ahead here. One of the things the president said on Friday is that he's going to double the tariffs on steel and aluminum up to 50% effective June the 4th. How much will that impact the construction industry?
Well, I think I was with the president at the U.S. Steel plant in Pittsburgh on Friday, and I will tell you that the president has the reignited the steel industry here in America. And back to the earlier statements on national security, there are national security priorities here for having a strong steel industry.
But do you have a prediction on how much it's going to impact the construction industry, for example?
Well, I have a prediction on how much it's going to impact the steel industry, and we'll see. There are a lot of elasticities that this is a very complicated ecosystem. So, is it going to impact the construction industry? Maybe, but it's going to impact the steel industry in a great way. The steel workers, were left on the side of the road after the China shock, and now they're back. They are Trump supporters, and when I tell you that it was magic in the arena, or it was actually at the steel plant that night, that these hardworking Americans know their jobs are secure, there's going to be capital investment, and the number of jobs is going to be grown around the country, whether it's in Pittsburgh, whether it's in Arkansas, whether it's in Alabama.
I want to ask you about this big tax bill that worked through the House is going to the Senate next. In it is an increase or suspension to the debt limit that you need delivered on by mid-July. How close of a brush with default could this be, given how massive some of the Senate changes are expected to be to the other parts of the bill?
Well, first of all, Margaret, I will say the United States of America is never going to default. That is never going to happen. That we are on the warning track, and we will never hit the wall.
You have more wiggle room if they don't deliver this by mid-July? I mean, how hard of a date is this?
We don't give out the X date because we use that to move the bill forward.
Sometimes deadlines help force action, as you know, particularly in this town, sir. That's why I'm asking. The president did say he expects pretty significant changes to this bill, though, so that affects the timing of it moving. What would you like Republican lawmakers to keep? What would you like them to alter?
Again, that's going to be the Senate's decision. Leader Thune, who I've worked closely with during this process, has been doing a fantastic job. And Margaret, I'll point out, everyone said that Speaker Johnson would not be able to get this bill out of the House with his slim majority. He got it out. Leader Thune has a bigger majority, and this is with President Trump's leadership. So
there's no red lines for you in there. I've just don't touch this. You can, tinker with that.
Well, I think that they're not necessarily my red lines. The president has his campaign promises that he wants to fulfill for working Americans. So it's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans for American-made automobiles.
So those have to stay in.
Those have to stay in.
JP Morgan's Diamond also predicted a debt market crisis. Cracks in the bond market was what he said. You are considering easing some regulations, you've said, for the big banks. How do you avoid that bond market crisis he's predicting spreading and really causing concern, particularly with all of the worries about American debt right now? So
again, I've known Jamie a long time, and for his entire career, he's made predictions like this. Fortunately, none of them have come true. That's why he's a banker, a great banker. He tries to look around the corner. One of the reasons I'm sitting here talking to you today and not at home watching your show is that I was concerned about the level of debt. So the deficit this year is going to be lower than the deficit last year, and in 2 years, it will be lower again. We are going to bring the deficit down slowly. We didn't get here in 1 year. We didn't get here in 1 year, and this has been a long process. So the goal is to bring it down over the next 4 years, leave the country in great shape in 2028.
You know that the Speaker of the House estimates this is going to add $4 to $5 trillion over the next 10 years, and there's that debt limit increase.
Well, again, Margaret, that's CBO scoring.
That's the Speaker of the House.
No.
He said it last Sunday on this program.
He said that's the CBO scoring.
He said that sounds right.
Let me tell you what's not included in there, what can't be scored. So we're taking in substantial tariff income right now. So there are estimates that could be another $2 trillion. That we are pushing through savings. So my estimate is that could be up to another $100 billion a year. So over the 10-year window, that could be $1 trillion. President has a prescription drug plan with the pharmaceutical companies that could substantially push down costs for prescription drugs, and that could be another $1 trillion. So there's the 4.
Treasury Secretary Bessent will be watching closely.
Thank you so much. I'm at the Reagan National Economic Forum, and I'm sitting with Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Jamie, thank you for sitting with us.
Maria, thrilled to be here.
I know we have limited time. I want to get right into it and first get your thoughts about this big, beautiful bill underway in the Senate, where you've got some pushback from some senators about spending cuts not being enough. What do you think they need to do?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I'm thrilled they got it through, and I think Michael Johnson did an unbelievable job of doing that. I think the Senate, I think they should finish it. I think increasing consistency, keeping the tax rates going that allow business to invest, small business to large business, is really important for growth and et cetera. And if you go back to the bill in 2017, it brought back trillions of dollars to the United States. It created a lot of jobs. It created a lot of growth. And people, when they look at those numbers, they don't accurately say what those are. So it will work. Then they should go back and worry about cutting, literally looking at, and I shouldn't say cutting, making things more efficient around, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. It could be done, but I think they're better off just getting this thing finished as best they can. The smaller the deficit is, the better.
Are you, as a business person running the largest bank, counting on that, the extension of those tax cuts?
Not so much JP Morgan, but I think if you talk to small businesses who they don't know if the rate's going to be like 28% or 40%, they need it. If you talk to a lot of companies who do a lot of R&D or a lot of equipment expensing, they need the certainty. And what you really don't want them to do is just waiting to find out what's going to happen before they make investments in new plants and equipment, et cetera. And you're seeing a little bit of that, so the sooner the better.
How much are you focused on debt and deficits right now?
It's a big deal. It is a real problem, but one day we're going to have the bond market's going to have a tough time. I don't know if it's 6 months or 6 years. So I think we have to focus on it. But when you say focus on it, the real focus should be growth, pro-business, proper deregulation, permitting reform, getting rid of blue tape, getting skills in schools, get that growth going. That's the best way. And then reform some of these programs. Everyone knows can be reformed properly. And I think some of the reform can take place. We're not taking benefits out of poor people or sick people, old people. You're just putting rules in place that make it more reasonable, less fraud, less waste, less abuse. So I think all those things need to be done. And then we can conquer that problem.
We've already seen a reaction in the bond market. Rates have been spiking. When you say something will happen in the bond market, what do you mean bond market will crack? What does that mean?
But the public has to understand is that something like $30 trillion of securities trades every day. These are investors around the world. Foreigners own $35 trillion of American securities. They have another $30 trillion of private investments in the United States or something like that in the United States. People vote with their feet. And they're going to be looking at the country, the rule of law, the inflation rates, the central bank policies, what they want to hedge and what they don't want to hedge. And so those rates aren't set by central banks. They can affect them. They can twist them. They can do things to make you feel more comfortable, which they should do. But, if people decide that the U.S. dollar isn't the place to be, yeah, you could see, spreads gap out, credit spreads gap out, and that will become a problem. We had that during COVID. The Fed properly stepped in then. We had that in 2019. We had it in 20. It will happen again. It's just, I can almost guarantee you that. I just don't know exactly when or what the trigger might be.
What kind of
and the important thing about that is it's not, for JP Morgan itself, it doesn't affect us that much. When you have these volatility in the markets, we trade, we're good at it, we finance companies. It hurts the people raising money, and that includes small businesses. That includes loans to small businesses, it includes high yield debt, it includes leveraged lending, it includes real estate loans. That's why you should worry about volatility in the bond markets, not because you should worry about the big banks.
What kind of growth are you looking for second half of the year?
Oh, God. I think our economists have it at like 1.5 or something like that, but I would rely on them. I don't know. I think there's so many moving parts. I just don't know how to look at something like that.
I mean, Kevin Hassett was on this show the other day, and he said he would not be surprised to see 4% growth in the second half of the year.
I disagree with Kevin.
You disagree? I mean,
I hope he's right. I just don't know.
Speaking of growth, look at the growth at JPM the other day, the Investor Day. You had all your shareholders happy with the goals that you set out, and your most recent quarter. What do you make, like $1 billion a week?
Close, yeah. but remember, but all that stuff we do has been investing. It's been taking place for 15 years.
That's earnings.
New branches, new bankers, new technologies, serving clients, we serve our multinational, U.S. all around the world, and that's how you build a company. and then we provide services, payments, and market making, and we raise capital. I think in total like $2.5 trillion a year and that includes governments, cities, states, hospitals, schools, large corporations, small businesses, and that's our job. Profits themselves bounce around for a whole bunch of different reasons, but we like doing it, and we're quite comfortable that we can grow our company.
You've also
and we've got real competition by it. So I don't sit here, being complacent. We have the other major, investment banks and commercial banks, but we have, the fintech folks. We've got foreigners, some who are doing a very good job. So I always look at the ones who are doing better than us and why. I don't just focus on, how well we're doing.
Who's doing better than you?
Stripe has built a great business in payments. We could have done some of that. PayPal's done stuff. There's some, we have a Chase UK, we have a digital-only bank, but you've seen Revolut's done a very good job building a real digital bank, but not just one country, but pan-European, and they're coming here. So a lot of people. I remember 10 years ago or 15 years ago, sending a bunch of people on our airplanes from consumer retail to China, and they said, "Why are we going to China? We're a U.S. bank." I said, "You'll find out when you get there." When we set them up with Ping An and Tencent and Alipay and Alibaba, and it opens up your eyes. People around the world are doing really interesting stuff. And you can debate what stable coins might do one day to banking. And so we're always looking at that competition of all different sorts.
What is the impact of the stablecoin legislation on the banks, on JPM?
I think we are going, first of all, we have a JP Morgan coin. I think that crypto, if you mean stablecoin, moving data, real-time payments, doing data and payments together, that stuff is real. We're going to be at the forefront of that. The JP Morgan coin today can move money and data, but as a deposit at JP Morgan. And so it's used internally. We're going to externalize it at one point. My view is we should be in that. I think the other question is, what's the laws around it, AML, BSA, KYC for other people? What's the access to the Fed? What are the rules of the Fed? The Fed may do it itself, to move money internationally. That's all reasonable. Remember, we already move $10 trillion a day, and it's digital. And we already move some of it real time. And so a lot of this, we're already building the technologies to do a better job for the client.
So why do we need digital assets?
Well, it depends what you mean by digital asset. It could be a very effective way to move money through the correspondent banking system, where everyone in that system will see where the money is, what it's for, where it is, all at the same time. So there are going to be some very good uses for blockchain.
You spend what, $20 billion on technology? You're spending more on technology than NASA.
Really?
Is that not right?
I don't know. I didn't know that.
Tell us about your allocation of money on technology and what your goals are.
It is about close to $20 trillion, and that's every business. When we look at it, so first of all, there's the big stuff that we do at the corporation. That's networks, the big data centers, certain policies, things like that. But then there's the stuff, and some AI policy. We spend billions of dollars in AI already, $1 billion in cyber to protect our clients. But then we do it at the business level. If you're in small business, what are you doing with data to do a better job for your client? That could be for technology. That could be better online account opening. It could be wealth management. It could be better fraud services. It could be hooking into accounts receivable, accounts payable systems. So it's at the very detailed level. In trading, you're talking about split-second trading, hedging, and taking place with AI. So for every business, they have a whole list of things that they're trying to get done to do a better job for the client. Better is faster, cheaper, ancillary services that people want you give away for free. So it's a whole wide set of stuff.
I'm glad you're talking about security and security of our money at JPM. You just got back from China.
Yeah.
You said when you were up there on stage today, you're not afraid. Tell me what your observations were in China. And I mean, didn't they just do an enormous hack?
Yeah.
Into our networks?
Yes. So cyber is a big deal. China cyber is a big deal. And we don't really know what our government does, by the way, but it's a big deal. And we spend a lot of money protecting us and our clients on cyber. What I mean by that, I'm not afraid of them, is that China, first of all, they're not afraid of us either. And going over there, you get the distinct impression that they are doing their thing. They're putting a lot of money into AI, cars, robotics. They're going to be 30 or 40% of new pharmaceuticals sometime shortly. They're going their way. But they have weaknesses. They still have a lot of poverty. They have a very tough neighborhood. A lot of their neighbors are rearming. They have to deal with us. We're still, the most prosperous economy on the planet. But my point, the thing I'm not afraid of them. I'm afraid that we don't get our own act together internally. If America just does our things right, deregulation, permitting, education, pro-business, grow the economy, help the lower income folks by growing the economy, fixing immigration, eventually allowing good immigration in, we'll be in great shape. We'll be the preeminent military and economy 30 or 40 years from now. If we're not, the world would be a very different world than what we live in today.
So what do you want to see? What should be done in terms of policy? You've been increasingly worried and talking about national security issues.
Yeah. Oh, so I say that there's like tectonic plate shifting. People looking, the world relied on the U.S. military umbrella. I think they should. You can easily say, people didn't spend enough money. We did too much of it. They relied on us too much. Or you can say we misused it sometimes. I think that's also true. But that is really important. If countries start looking elsewhere for their national security, that will become an issue. It's directly related to their economic security. So it's not just trade. Is who do you want to partner with? So we already have alliances with 100 different countries, economic alliances, 100 different countries, but also India. Who do you want to partner with? And that includes trade, it includes investment, development finance, and it includes educating them about the values of America, which we've stopped doing a little bit, values of freedom of speech, freedom of enterprise. It allows allowing good immigration here. People have pointed out that 40% of the new companies were immigrants who came here to be American. They didn't come here to change America. And so if we do those things right, and then the other long list is permitting, dereg, I call it the blue state, as you know, we'll be great. We just have to get our act together.
Well, you said something that struck me earlier. We should be stockpiling. What did you say?
I said not bitcoins, but bullets, tanks, missiles. Because you pointed out national security is a critical thing. So the most important thing to me in trade is going to be protecting our own national security. And that's around resilient supply chains for medical ingredients, for anything that goes into our F-35's rare earths, and related. Think of 2 nanocentimeter AI chips, things like that. We say, yeah, this is important for American national security. We need resilient supply chains. And then we have to do things to help the military, which is we don't keep productive capability empty. So all of us do that in our businesses, but their missile capability, they have, I forgot the number, they have a plant building missiles, but if you have the double or triple production, we don't have a plant sitting there ready to go. And we need that.
Right.
And that should have been part of our planning. We don't allow enough flexibility for the military. The world's changed. And you see what's happening to these drones. What you need is very different this month than even 2 months ago. So they need more flexibility to buy this, not buy that. We need to spend more money. We need to do budgeting, do multi-year budgeting for them. And so we're going to lay this out. We have a thing called the Defense Action Forum. We spend a lot of time with some of the generals and some of the new tech companies in equipment, and then obviously the big prime contractors. What do we need to do to have the best military? What's changed? And we got to do it now. We don't really have the luxury to wait.
Well, so when President Trump is thinking about these trade deals that he's talking about, what you're saying is put limitations on certain groups. Like it's not, bullets are not the same as T-shirts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing is it's unilateral. You don't have to negotiate. Certain things are just, this is the way America's going to do it. They've done that in a whole bunch of different things. This is the way we do it. There are other things which they should focus on too, which I say is unfair trade, where if you believe they're using their capital, their surplus, their economy, subsidies to dominate a global industry like cars or batteries, that's not unfair. On that one, of course you should deal with it in trade, but you also need to do it with their allies. It's not nearly as effective to do it for yourself. And now we don't get any of that stuff here, but the allies are going to do it anyway. Right. So they can still dominate the global industry without us actually being part of it.
Jamie, as I wrap up here, what do you want to say about leadership? I mean, you were at the Investor Day the other day and everyone was saying, oh, he's here for another 5 years. I mean, you're not going anywhere, it doesn't seem like. But why does everybody talk about soon you're going to have to retire?
It's several, I don't. It's several years away. And obviously it's always up to God and the board. We've got some great people. There will be an appropriate time. And then I may stick around for a couple of years, up to God and the board as, chairman or executive chairman or something like that. I love what I do. I love my country. And I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't fighting for something every day.
What do you want to say to a young person who wants to become the next Jamie Dimon? How do they do it?
It's work and learn, read everything, talk to everybody, talk to every side. Don't become weaponized by one side or the other. Get out in the road. It's amazing. Get around the world because certain countries are doing some fabulous stuff. earn your respect every day with a little bit of humanity and heart. People should want to trust you. They'll work for it. They want to trust you. So leadership isn't like just pounding people. It's, and you like if I came to Fox, and I was running Fox, I don't know what everyone in Fox does every day. I know what everyone does every day in JP Morgan. That's why I work hard. That's why I do my bus trips and then say, we'll fix it for you. Whether the client tells me of a problem or the teller tells me of a problem, and have a little heart, humanity, treat everyone properly. Make sure you treat, from the security guards to the waiters to the CEO, treat them properly and enjoy your life, and enjoy the journey a little bit. And it's that journey is never straight. I mean, it's a rocky thing. So,
I know you a long time, Jamie, and most people may not know this, but even you got fired once.
I did. And everyone, they introduced me, they never mentioned that, that I worked for 15 years for one guy, helped build Traveler. I'd been president, chief operating officer, merged it with Citi. And that obviously wasn't going to work out, and I got fired. And I was surprised, but eventually you dust off and you move on. And
then you came back and you crushed them in market share.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, final question here. Jamie, how do the markets feel to you right now?
Complacent. Prices are high. Things are going okay. Prices are kind of working in a soft landing. I hope that's true. I just tell people, I think the odds of that are just lower than other people think, and that they're going to surprise. There's so many things moving out there, from deficits to geopolitics to trade. It's complex, and something can go wrong. And when things do, you usually get surprised. And I was taking my job, not guessing the future, being prepared to serve my clients regardless of the future. That's how I look at business.
Jamie, it's great to see you today.
Yeah, great. Enjoy it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jamie Dimon.